Greetings, folks. Joining me on Rockposer Dot Com is a musician who will be very well known to you all. Previous guest, in fact, a few years back. Got to say, welcome, Mr. Adrian Vandenberg.
Thank you very much. Great to be here, actually.
Yeah, welcome back. Congratulations on what is a fantastic new album. Of course, we're talking about 2020, which is out 29th of May on Mascot Records.
Yeah, there's a lot of 20s in there, isn't it? Yeah, not bad.
Well, where can we start? I guess start with the obvious question. What made you decide to resurrect, as it were, Vandenberg?
Well, it was a little bit of an interesting train of thought that occurred to me. First of all, in the last year, the last 5 years, I had my band Vandenberg Moon Kings, and we had a fantastic time. I started realizing more and more that I wanted to go quite a lot heavier and faster and deeper and all that stuff, like the luxury edition, so to speak. And next to that, a very important reason was that my good friend singer Jan in Moon Kings, fantastic singer, but as some people may know, he's got a huge farming company in Holland, and it just kept growing and growing, and it had the result that we couldn't really do some serious touring abroad because he couldn't stay away from his farm for longer than like 1 or 2 days, and which basically kept us mainly in Holland and some German stuff and one-offs in Japan, and we did 2 one-offs in England, I think, and it's just rather frustrating because as people will know, I've been touring internationally ever since '82, so I really started missing it, and especially doing much more shows in England, and traveling, be a gypsy, a rock and roll gypsy, so to speak. So those 2 reasons made me think about that it would be better to start up a new project, or if you will, new band actually, because I hate the word project when it's concerned to rock and roll. It sounds more like an office, which it isn't. If you would see the chaos in my house, it's about as far as an office as possible. So anyway, my manager suggested, well, if you're going to start a new band with a new lineup and all that stuff, why don't you call it Vandenberg again? And I immediately reacted, well, first of all, it would be maybe a little bit predictable, but the main reason for me initially not to do it would be that I really didn't want it to be like a nostalgic type of thing, which you see happen quite regularly, and like old bands getting back together, and sometimes it's fun for 1 or 2 times, but mostly, in my opinion, it's a little bit too nostalgic. So, but then I thought, well, it would be kind of cool too, because it would be a brand new, super dynamic band, but with a name that has a heritage. So it would be quite recognizable for people who followed my wheedling on the guitar over the years, and they would kind of know what to expect. And there would be like a link to the earlier traditional Vandenberg stuff, but then the harder songs of that, songs like Waiting for the Night, and a song like Wait on the first album, a song like This Is War on the second album. So there were a bunch of songs on the harder side of the early Vandenberg that do connect with what we're doing with this new band. So when I thought about it for 1 or 2 days, I thought, yeah, it makes sense. And also another thing would be, maybe that about 5 years ago, 2 original band members from the early 80s, 30 years later, they started a lawsuit in which they wanted to claim my name, my family name, and they wanted to prohibit me from using my own name. So 6 court cases resulted from that surrealistic claim, and it left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth as far as the memory to the early Vandenberg days go. And this would be like a perfect opportunity to flush it all away, and make it happening and dynamic and kick ass again.
If I could just very briefly touch on Moon Kings, were you happy with how they turned out, and were you actually sad to call time on that band?
Sorry, can you repeat the last?
Were you happy with how Moon Kings turned out, and were you sad to call time on the band?
Yeah. It was a very difficult decision because we had fantastic 5 years and we
Yeah.
became really good friends, and we have a very unusual chemistry in the band, which is also a reason why I didn't really want to keep calling it Moon Kings and replace the singer,
Sure.
because for me, Moon Kings was definitely those four guys together. And we do have like an idea. Well, maybe in 2 years we can do 5 or 6 Dutch shows because of the the farming company from Jan the singer. We were pretty much stuck to Holland, so we can always do in a couple of years a couple of Moon King shows for the hell of it, because we love to do it. But it was a difficult decision because of the fantastic time that we always have on stage.
This next question is, how did you pick the new lineup? Obviously, guitar was the easy bit.
Yeah, that was relatively easy. I know the guy and I get on well with him, the guitar player. So it's all good. But first of all, another thing that I forgot to mention, for me, it only made sense to resurrect the Vandenberg name from the grave, so to speak, if I could find an incredible singer, because that would also avoid the nostalgic type of
Sure.
taste that it could have. And then I suddenly remembered Ronnie, who I was very briefly in touch with 5 years ago, when I complimented him on his incredible work with Rainbow, Richard Blackmore's Rainbow. I was blown away by his vocals. And so when I started thinking about this idea, I thought, hey, wait a minute, let's see what Ronnie's doing, because he does do quite some stuff, but Rainbow only does like a couple of shows every 2 years. And unfortunately,
Yes.
because I'm a huge fan, but so I got in touch with Ronnie, and he reacted very enthusiastically, because one of the reasons being that he told me that he actually started singing when he heard the Starkers in Tokyo album that Coverdale and I did in the middle of the 90s, just guitar and vocals. And at the time, Ronnie didn't even realize that Whitesnake was actually a hard rocking band, because all he knew for quite a while was the Starkers in Tokyo thing. And so he reacted very enthusiastically. So I flew to Madrid, where he lived, and we had an instant connection, and we took it from there, basically. And the drummer and the bass player was a story in itself. I'm not very aware of what's going on in Holland on the rock front, because I never had too much faith in Dutch rock bands, to be honest, because all my favorites come from the UK, basically. I started with Hendrix, and Hendrix was import the UK, of course, but Cream and Free and Bad Company, Led Zeppelin, all the great stuff. So none of that stuff ever came from Holland, basically. So I've never really kept an eye on it. And so I thought, geez, it would be very complicated if I get the other players from other countries as well. If you want to get together, everybody has to fly in from all over the world. So I did some research, and I stumbled onto a yearly top 10 of drummers that are voted by their peer drummers as being like the best guys in Holland. So on number 1 for 7 years straight was our present drummer Koen Herfst. He was voted by his fellow drummers as the best rock drummer in Holland already. Actually Holland, Belgium, and Luxembourg already for 7 years straight. So I thought, geez, man, that guy can't really be a hack, on drums. So I looked him up on YouTube, and I stumbled into an amazing drum solo that blew me away. And I thought, if he's interested, this would be the perfect guy. And he reacted very enthusiastically, because for the reason that I just mentioned, he had a similar problem. He said, well, I've been waiting for something like this for a long time, because in the rock field there's nothing very serious happening in Holland. And he really wanted to tour internationally, which he had some experience with.
Right.
With a Dutch band called Epica, like a female-fronted rock band, which is usually like a red-haired girl in a corset and screams at the top of the lung with a couple of guys behind her. We all know how that works. And he didn't really enjoy that too much, because it was all, a lot of programmed stuff and on a hard disk,
right,
and all the shit, as it usually goes. So and Randy was a tip from a very well-known Dutch bass player who teaches bass at one of the rock academies in Holland. And he says, I've got the perfect guy for you, And Randy, as a matter of fact, toured for 2 years with the new wave of British heavy metal band called Tank.
Yes.
So Randy does have, he's only 20-some years old, but his favorite bands are Rainbow and Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple. So man, you can't go wrong. So yeah, it kind of fell in place. I didn't even have to audition.
I'm guessing
Which
Ronnie's just got one of those hard rock voices, hasn't he?
Oh man, the guy blows me away. I mean, in the studio, the weird thing is, I've worked with some of the best rock singers ever, and when you're in the studio with them, that you can always tell that it takes quite some effort to hit the high notes with the right intensity. And Ronnie just stands there relatively relaxed, and then the sound comes out of his face. It's unbelievable.
Isn't it annoying?
Yeah, it was just a blast. I had a smile on my face that almost so wide that it made my head fall backwards if I wasn't careful.
Next question would be, why did you choose to re-record Burning Heart? Tell me, because it's one of, I guess, Vandenberg's best-known songs, or it's just something that is really, excuse the sort of half pun, so close to your own heart?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it wasn't my intention. What happened was when the record company wanted to put out a press release that we were, this band was put together and Ronnie was involved in all that stuff. My manager said, well, it's just a press release if you don't put any music with it. But we didn't we didn't go into the studio yet, so we didn't really have any music. And then I suddenly remember that with the Moon Kings drummer and bass player, we recorded bass, drums, and guitars for the second Moon Kings album for Burning Heart, just in case the Japanese company, as usual, would like to have a bonus track.
Yeah.
So I remember that I thought, all I have to do is put a guitar solo on it and fly to Ronnie and have him put some vocals on it, and at least we have something, with the press release. And then when we finished the album, the record company said, why don't we put Burning Heart on it? And I said, well, that seems a little predictable to me, And they said, which makes sense, they said, well, it would be a very nice bridge between, the Resurrected Vandenberg 2020 and the very first Vandenberg album. And that was actually a pretty nice thought. And once I heard it in the middle of, in between the other songs, it doesn't really disconnect with it, It feels rather natural, which kind of surprised me. So I thought, maybe it's a better idea than I initially thought.
When you came to write and record the album, did you feel you had to make the album sound a certain way to maybe appease fans, or was it just something that sort of naturally happened, as it were?
Yeah, I always write really naturally, which is something that I taught myself over the years, because especially when I joined Whitesnake in '86. 86.
Don't even go there.
I realized, of course, that Whitesnake was a very well-established band, and that there were certain boundaries which you basically had to stay inside with, because the style, especially after the '87 album, when there was obviously like a pretty clear style change.
Yeah.
But I was always a Whitesnake fan, so David always told me a number of times that was a very important reason that he asked me to join them, was the fact that he saw all these similarities on the Vandenberg albums and what he wanted to write and stuff. So in those days, of course, I worked with David on the songs. So you feel like you can't go too far away from the Whitesnake path, because fans will expect like a certain kind of music. But
sure.
So after I quit Whitesnake, which was in 1999, because David basically wanted to stop making music, as we all know, he started back up 2 years later. But as my mom always says, nothing changes its mind more than a human being, which is true. I thought, if I'm going to pick up the guitar again, I want to just feel free to write whatever I want, and be proud of all the influences that have inspired me over the years. Whether it's early Cream and Free, Bad Company, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Rainbow, all that stuff. So I basically, the way I try to describe it is, when I have a guitar in my lap and I have the feeling that I open up all the windows and doors in my mind, to let all the influences tumble in, and I just go ahead, So with this album, I didn't really have to think about a direction, because every time when I make an album, I have a tendency to think, well, who cares what this Vandenberg guy is going to come up with? I never really know beforehand, and I don't want to think about it anyway, because I just want to make a record that I would immediately rush out and buy because I'm a fan of this kind of music. So it basically just flows in naturally,
Absolutely. Obviously, with everything, of course, which is currently happening around the world at the moment, I guess you couldn't have picked a more awkward time to release new music. Yeah. So many bands.
Yeah, but I'm a hardcore positive guy, so I think, well, there's also an advantage, as shitty as it is, because we were going to start this European tour at the end of May, but at the same time, we have an opportunity now to establish the sound of this band, this Resurrected Vandenberg name, before we go on the road, more than we normally would have, because everybody's watching porn on the internet and hopefully listening to rock music, So this week we have another track coming out, and we're going to keep releasing a track on the web every month. So by the time we start touring, people are much more familiar with us, and also there is fortunately a financial advantage to it too, because the shows that were being booked before this Corona stuff happened were financially not very feasible, because it would cost quite a lot of money to do the European tour that we would wanted to do, because you being a professional, you will know how promoters book. They go, well, yeah, we don't know what's going to happen when the record is out. We don't know how the record is going to sound. And right now we have an opportunity to introduce the band, and people will know what it sounds like, and that we mean serious business, So that's definitely gonna help, because our UK agent who does Europe, Neil O'Brien, you may know the name. He says, man, right now the offers are flowing in like never before. So that's a beautiful thing.
That's good news.
Yeah, it is. So that's really great. I can't wait to tour the UK, because for me, the last time I really toured the UK was with Whitesnake and with Vandenberg in the early '80s, but with Whitesnake in the late '80s, and that's it. With Moon Kings, we only did 1 or 2 shows in England, and it's for me really frustrating. But now I'm sure we can make up for it, which is great.
Frustrating for me too, because those Whitesnake shows in the late '80s was the last time I saw you perform live, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, well, then you know a little bit how it feels. But man, I actually have relatives in England. The sister of my mom got kidnapped by a British pilot after the war, and I did spend holidays in Hereford in my late teens, and my cousins, my nephews had a band, and one of my nephews actually had drum lessons from Simon Kirk in the early days, the Bad Company free drummer. So it was definitely an influence, because my nephews took me to shows, and as a matter of fact, I got to see Lemmy when he was still in the Hawkwind at the time.
Oh, blimey.
Yeah, that was great. I was just kind of surprised, because I was a pretty innocent early teenager, and everybody was stoned as a parrot over there, or drunk on cider, which is apparently like a Hereford type of thing.
Yes.
But I did have a couple of very nice girlfriends, and that really inspired me to keep playing the guitar, I suppose.
I guess final question, really. Do you see Vandenberg as a long-term thing?
Oh yeah,
rather than say 1 or 2 albums.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I would really love to keep this lineup together, and it's very promising, because everybody in the band is really enthusiastic and motivated. For Ronnie, it's especially also great. He told me, I really wrote the songs to tailor his vocal capabilities, which are pretty much limitless, but also. Ronnie, as you know, he's been, known to sing here and there, but he always has to sing older songs, whether it's with Rainbow, or he did a tour with Michael Schenker, or with, he does some Queen stuff in Russia, of all places. And So right now, it's really great. He told me that he's singing original material that's been written especially for his voice. So for him, this is a great opportunity to show more of his own style of singing, which for me is very. I mean, you can clearly hear his influences.
Yes.
Guys like Coverdale and Ronnie Dio and Steve Perry, and Freddie Mercury. He's like a combination of and Bon Scott actually. But after 4 words, I can already tell it's Ronnie. And this is a great opportunity for him to showcase his own voice, his own style.
Well, Adrian, it's been, as always, an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thanks
Same
so
here,
much
man.
for taking the time to pop back over to Rockposer.com. Best of luck with the album. As honest as I always am, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It just seems to gel together absolutely perfectly. And hopefully we'll see you guys in UK, if not by the end of the year, hopefully next year.
Oh, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks so much, man.
Cheers, Adrian.
Thanks
Thanks now.
And hi to everybody. Bye-bye.